Hi, this is Angela Anderson, and I wanted to show you step-by-step instructions on how to do this pear painting that I did with my children's art class this week. We'll get started. This is one of the finished one that I did. I'm going to show you from scratch. Put that over here. We used a creamy yellow, raw sienna, brighter yellow, a burnt umber, a bright red, I think it was dark cadmium red deep, titanium white, purple. This is a deep green hookers green. This is Verity, but any kind of teal, blue. This is what I use for the background, but you can use whatever color you want. And I let my students choose their background colors. But this one looks really nice because we start with the red background and the teal really pops off the green. This is a lime green, a brighter green. I can't read that. And then this was a cobalt blue. That was also a background color, so you can use whatever for these two if you want. And also the purple was an optional color. So anyhow, let's get started. What I did with my students, just to save time and not to dirty another plate, we just sprayed down our canvas a little bit with a little bit of water, and I came around and squirted this True Red straight onto the canvas for each student, and then they used a sponge brush and just spread it around. And they don't have to be real careful with this because we're going to cover up the entire thing. Only a little bit of this red's going to show through, but it really makes it a neat contrast where it does peek through on the original or the finished product. It gives it just a really neat extra texture in the background. So that's that. I'm going to cut and blow dry this. While this was drying in class, I had them sketch out their pears to practice it, and usually by the time we finished sketching out a few pears, a couple of times, they were dry. I also have a hair dryer in class though, in case we need to dry them. So I'm going to cut real quick and I'll come back. Okay, I'm back. This is dry. I have the students look to make sure there's no shiny spots, and that's how they can tell it's completely dry. Also, if you feel it, it shouldn't feel cold. Then I have them get out a piece of chalk, and I've lost my chalk. There it is, it's hiding there. Just regular chalk. I find it's easier to use chalk than pencil because it's easier to erase it on your canvases. I use it all the time whenever we're painting. I even use it on murals on walls when I do it for myself. So anyhow, the way I had my kids sketch their pears is I had them figure out how far from the top to bottom they want it to reach. A lot of times if they start at the top and try to work toward the bottom, they'll end up with a little tiny pear up in here or down in here, depending on where they start. They have a hard time kind of filling up the canvas. So what I had them do is figure out how tall they want their pear and make a little mark, and where the bottom part of their pear should be. So they've got two little marks to reference, so when they're drawing they can really use that whole space up. All right, so I had them do that, and then I had them go out from either side of their line that they did, and the pear on the bottom is kind of flat. Then it curved up. Just did a big wide curve on either side, and then I had them do a smaller curve down from the neck. The neck of the pear is almost in an A shape like this. Okay, and then just had them connect the lines. That made it really easy for them to understand. I don't have them sketch out their stem. They can if they want. They will do it even when I tell them not to, because we're just going to paint the whole background. The stem will be the very last thing we paint, so they don't have to go around it when they're painting their background. So that's how I have them start. I also had them figure out if they wanted to have their pear setting on something. They came up a little bit and just did a line on either side of their pear to, well, mine's kind of, let me look at it. There we go. So making sure that their line is even. They could even do it in a diagonal if they want to, and I had one of my students do that. Okay. Now I used only 3 different brushes. I had them use a large flat brush, kind of a large round, and a very small round. You could probably skip this one if you didn't have it, and just do everything with the large flat, but it's a little bit easier for them to do some of the little details with the round brush. This is for the stem. And then I also have the toothbrush for when we do, when we finish it, there's speckles in it. So when I do my own paintings, I use a wet on wet blending. It can be difficult with acrylics because they dry so quickly. So you have to do this part in steps. And if your paint is starting to dry, you have to stop and let it dry completely before you keep going. So we just did the yellows and greens first, let it completely dry, and then we did the browns and reds on the other side to finish it. Okay, so let me just show you. I just had them scoop up a bunch of paint on their brush. This is a creamy yellow. I did not put enough out for myself. Excuse me. They love that sound. Okay, and it's okay if you see some of that red showing through here and there. It's gonna happen, and actually kind of adds to the look of it. Overall, I think I like it. So I have them use the side of the flat brush along the edges. It gives a cleaner line and it helps them. It's easier for them to do than if they're doing like this. They have a feathery edge to it sometimes. So if they'll scoot it along its edge like this, they get a cleaner line. And they can come in and fill it in. Okay, so then they fill in the whole pear. I'll do this quickly. Let me do it and come back. All right, I'm back, and I wanted to say also that I like to use the thicker bodied acrylics for this. The craft paints do not have enough thickness to the paint, and they dry too quickly, so you can't really do these blending techniques that I'm going to do. So I filled in my whole pear with Naples yellow, and I've left the paint on my brush, left the yellow on my brush, and I'm dipping into this bright green. I think it's called permanent green. I had a dark, a medium, and a lime green. So it's the medium color green. And I'm going to figure out which side I want my shadow side and my highlight side. And I just went along the edge, pulled color along the edge, and I set my flat side along the edge like that. Go up a little bit, and once that color starts leaving my brush, then I start just tapping around and pulling that color toward the middle a little bit, and have them use little short strokes. They really did this, they picked up on this pretty quickly, so it was easier for them to do than I thought it might be. Some of them, of course, went all the way up to here, or some of them would have like a line of color if they used too much paint, say, and they were pulling from this direction. They may end up with, I'm going to do it on purpose so you can see what I'm talking about. They may end up with something like that where it looks, you obviously can see where the green ends abruptly. So what I had them do in that case is take their paintbrush and a paper towel and just wipe off their paint on a paper towel. And then they can use that brush and pull back in and just keep wiping it off. And pull from the yellow into the green. Whoop, there we go. And it's starting to blend, and then it kind of feather back and forth, do little X marks. See, and that pulled up, it acts like a sponge a little bit, and it'll pull up some of the color off the canvas. Of course, you have to do this quickly, and you have to do it while it's still wet, But if you kind of keep an eye on them and see if anybody's having trouble with that, they can do that. I wouldn't add a lot of water at this point because you're wanting to keep the paint kind of thick. If you start adding water, it can pull up the paint. I don't add water when I'm doing wet on wet. I only do it on a dry canvas, and I'll show you that later. So see, that's starting to dry right there. You can see where it's starting to lift that undercolor. So I've been talking too much here, but okay, so you get the idea. You're just blending, and I had them go all the way up the side of the pear with the green. And it's okay if some of the little brush strokes show because that adds character to it. I like that. I just don't like it too much when they had like a straight line of color. You know, the idea is to teach them how to blend it a little bit. So that's this side. I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush out. And I think this other side is dry enough that I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. If you've probably with your students, you won't be able to do this because it takes them a while to get this one side done, and by the time you do this side, the other side starts to dry. So if that's the case, I would have this side dry completely before you did this. But I'm going to show you this side, and it's basically the same thing. I'm using the this is raw sienna, and I did that for the kind of the bottom half of my thing, and I can actually tell that this is starting to dry a little bit, so this may not work. I'm gonna have to do it quick. Okay, see, it's definitely pulling up that yellow. Okay, blend a little bit of that brown there, and I blended. I'm gonna go ahead and stop because it is starting to dry, and I'll come back. Okay, I'm back. This is completely dry now again. I'm going to clean out this big brush, this large flat brush, and I'm going to grab, actually, I'll probably put these two separate ones here. I'm going to grab this bright yellow and lay it on here. And actually remembered later that I did this before I did the brown, but it won't matter. You'll still be able to see the brown through it since it's such a light color. And the reason I put this on after I put the creamy yellow on is because the creamier yellow has more, it's a more opaque paint. It's got more white in it, I think. So this yellow if you tried to do this with this bright yellow, it would not cover at all. You would not even see it against the red. In fact, I'll put it over here and you can tell what I'm talking about. It disappears. You can't even see it. So you have to put something with a little bit of white to it underneath in your undercoat, or else you won't see this yellow, bright yellow on top. Okay, so that's why I did the creamy yellow first. Then I'm going to grab some lime green. I didn't clean it out my brush. I'm just blending them together while they're wet. And I put the lime green all the way over to the side where I did my green blending, and this will cover up any little marks too. So you know, if they've got some of the red showing through or they picked up some of the undercoat, you can usually fix it with this at this stage a little bit. Okay, so I didn't cover completely over on top of this, all this green, because you want this darker green to still show, but I did layer with these two colors, the bright yellow and the lime green. Okay, so that's that. And like I said, I just do little light X strokes back and forth like this, and blend it while it's still wet. Okay, and that looks good. So I've got the brighter yellow. You still see some of the creamy yellow through here and there. Just every layer of color that you add will add more depth to the painting and make it more realistic looking and visually interesting. Okay, so at this point I can probably go ahead and put my darker shadow on this side since I haven't touched this with the paint. I'm going to switch over to my round brush. Actually, I did that with the round brush with the students. I forgot. They can use the round brush or they can use that flat brush for that part. But I'm gonna switch to the round brush, wet it down, have them tap it against the side of the cup to get off the extra water, and then pick up just a little bit of this burnt umber on the tip of the brush, not a lot, just a little tiny bit, and they're gonna go along the bottom of their pear. Pick up a little bit more. And work in small sections, go along the bottom of the pear. I wouldn't go all the way up at this point, just do a little section at a time. Okay, and then they can clean the brush out and touch it on the paper towel once, and then come over here, come back in with the wet and blend that brown out with the wet. This is really important that this background is completely dry when you do this, otherwise all of that paint that you've put on will lift off when you put that water on there. That's why I wouldn't do this on this side at this point, because you've got that light yellow on there. Acrylics can be kind of funny about that, so the wet on wet only works when everything's wet, if that makes sense. If everything and the paint is thick, not watery. This watery thinning down of the paint with water only works if it's completely dry underneath, not on the wet paint. At least in my opinion, it works better, especially with kids. I can, you know, as an adult, you probably could control it, but the kids don't can't tell when it's starting to lift, and they'll go too far and it makes a mess, and then they get discouraged. So anyhow, okay, so that's giving it a nice dark shadow under here. I'm going to pick up some of the green, some of the dark green, and I'm going to do that some more up in here. With that, I wouldn't put the burnt umber all the way up necessarily. You don't have to. You can if you want to, but my brush is already kind of wet, so it's blending pretty nicely. I'm going to wet it down because I'm getting kind of a line here. I'm going to wet down my brush and blend that out a little bit. Okay, and you can play with this. You could leave this step out completely if you don't feel comfortable with it. I just wanted to show the kids both wet on wet and the blending with the water on the dry canvas. So I'm going to put a little bit more dark down in here, because don't be afraid of going dark. There's the more contrast, the more rounded it'll look. So as long as it blends out, you're going to be okay, even if you go pretty dark. Okay, so there you go. And they can even use their fingers to blend it out. I do that all the time too, if I'm in a hurry. Okay, so this side of the pear is done now. I've got the burnt umber and the dark green, and I started with this bright green. Then on the other side, and this should be dry now, so I'm going to go ahead and do it now. On the other side, I've cleaned out my brush, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of red. And I'm going to have to turn this because I'm not facing the right way to do this. I'm going to do the red along the side. This is a different red than the background red. It's a little bit darker red. You could probably use the same red, but it might not. You definitely have to do the background a different color if you did that. Like you'd leave that red as the background. Probably. Okay. So I'm doing the same thing as the other side. I put down the red, and then I just went back in with some water and thinned it out a little bit and blended it. And I had them come in a little bit on their neck, because the neck of the pear kind of has a little bit of a shadow right here where it bends out. Okay. So even though this is your highlight side, it'll still have a little bit of a difference. Okay. And I'm going to bring that red down in here too. Okay. So I'm going to put some more of this burnt, or this raw sienna down in here also. Make it come all the way down. Okay. So So that's pretty much it on the pear. You can do a little bit up in here too if you want. Actually, I probably want to do a little bit of green or something up in here on the side where the stem is going to be. Okay. And don't worry about your background if you get outside the lines or anything like that, because we're going to be covering that up. So, excuse me. Okay, at this point, I would put my highlight in. I'm going to use this brush again. And then pick up just a little bit of white on the tip. And just dab white up on the neck. And I just have them keep kind of dabbing it on, and then had them clean it off, and then pull from the outside edges and leave the middle part really bright, but pull the color away from the outside edges. And that helps to blend it, and then they can use their finger too to kind of blend it a little bit. Okay. Then they have another highlight that's gonna be right over here where the pear kind of sticks out and comes out at you. So here again, I'm gonna lay down some color. I'm gonna make this a little bit brighter up here too. Okay, clean out my brush. It's still a little bit of wet, so it's gonna blend this color out around the edges. Okay, and then this is looking a little bit too wet. It's kind of getting puddles, so I'm just gonna take it and wipe it on my towel over here, and then it'll start picking up some of that color. Wipe it, keep wiping it until it not so. And I want to keep doing this until that white edge completely disappears. You can even use your brush and kind of scrub it a little bit. And I've done this with the dry brush too, technique where they use the dry brush and they scrub the color on for the highlight with the dry brush. They tend to overdo it, and then what happens is sometimes the middle part will turn out to be no color. Where you want the highlight to be will end up with no color, and all around it you'll have kind of a halo of white where the color has attached. So anyhow, I should have let that dry a little bit more. I picked up a little bit of that red, but that's all right. I'm going faster than I did with my kids. They take a little bit more time to do it, and I try to make sure that they're all kind of on the same page before we go to the next step. So some of them will be over at the hair dryers drying theirs off once they finish each step. Okay, so I'm happy with my highlights. Okay, so I finished my pear. I'm going to take a toothbrush, wet it down, pick up a little bit of this burnt umber color, and take it over to a plate or just a flat surface. Make a little puddle. Okay. Then you use the back end of a small brush and just lightly run it across the bristles. And it'll make these little splatters for you. Okay. There. We're good. And don't worry about it getting on the background because we're going to paint over that. So if they get any big water spots that you don't they don't want, sometimes there'll be big puddles. You can just touch them up with the paper towel and they'll lift off, or you can wet the paper towel a little bit and wipe it gently. Just tap on it and it'll come up. You probably want to make sure that the background of the pear is dry before you do this step, so that in case you do get a little mistake, that it'll wipe off, and you won't wipe off your undercoat with it. Okay, and so now all that's left is for them to fill in their background, and for that I used the big brush and just did a wet on wet. I'm just going to use a variety of these colors that I have. And here again, have them use the side of their brush to go up alongside the edge of the pear, and that way they can be kind of careful about it. Also, I had them leave a little bit of the red showing between, so I didn't have them cover over their pear, but I had them kind of go right up next to it and leave a little bit of that red showing. And it just, I like the effect. It kind of makes it glow a little bit. I don't know. You can have them do whatever. It's just, that's what I did with mine. I'm going to add a little bit of this cobalt blue. Blend that in with it while the teal is still wet. And then I just have them work around their pear in sections and do the blending. I wouldn't have them do this color all the way around and then come back with another color, because by the time they came back it might be drying. So I want to be sure that they're doing this all at the same time, one side at a time, if that makes sense. Okay, I've got the background done, and wanted to also mention the shadow that you might want to add to their pears. So I used purple. Almost every color works well with purple. It's just a nice, cool color that looks good as a shadow. So I just went along the side of the pear that had the dark shadows, the green side with the dark brown, and went all the way up along the pear and underneath it, and then pulled the color while this background was still wet, pulled the color out on one side to make a shadow. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's just kind of, you're just indicating a kind of an area that's darker. Okay, so that's that, and then I'm going to pick up this little round brush that we've saved for this last part, and there should be some burnt umber in here still, so I'll wet down the brush, wet down that burnt umber a little bit. Load it up, and then I used this creamy yellow that we used for the background of the pear and just ran the one side of that brush through it to pick up a little bit of that color, and then had them start their stem down into the pear a little bit so that it doesn't look like it's kind of setting out up on top of it, but actually is part of it, and just pull it, and then the highlight side should go towards the highlight side of the pear. Then I picked up a little bit more burnt umber and just had them tap a little bit of burnt umber right there where that pear is going to touch and attach to the body of the pear. Okay, so that's that, and they can also put a little bit of a highlight on that end of the stem if they want, or at the top of it to kind of make it visible. I try not to have them play with it too much, because the more they play with it, the wider and wider and wider it gets. I try to have them just do it with one stroke of a small brush, and that way they get a nice small stem on there, and it looks good. Okay, and then if they want to sign it, they can do their initials or something here at the bottom corner. But at this point, it's done. I'm gonna hold it up there so you can see the finished product on mine. And on this one, I did the I just left it red. Actually, I kind of ran out of time in class, and so I just did a little bit of a shadow on this side with the darker red color while I was in class to show them how to do it. But I like the red with it also. So there's two different kind of examples there. And if you go to my blog, I'll post a link. You can see the what my students did with this project. And I think they did a really good job. They had a fun time with it, and I think the parents were surprised at how realistic they looked. But anyhow, hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.